everyone, welcome. This is India Tonight. I'm Shibani Gharat and joining me is my colleague Sumita Karir from Delhi. Now, in a major boost to bilateral ties, India and Oman have signed a landmark Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement or Cepa today in Muscat. The pact inked during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit grants duty-free access to over 98% of Indian exports to Oman, covering key sectors like textiles, agriculture, pharmaceuticals and automobiles. Bilateral trade already exceeding $10 billion is expected to grow further, strengthening India's strategic footprint in the Gulf region. This deal marks a new chapter in India's expanding Gulf strategy, following similar pacts like the one with UAE, and positions Oman as a key gateway to Middle East and Africa amidst efforts to diversify trade partnerships.
Absolutely, Shibani. So that's the big story. But the other big story that transpired here at the India Economic Conclave was a session that was conducted by Sanjeev Sanyal. Now, Sanjeev Sanyal, while in conversation with the Times Network, stated that he's not bothered, he's not worried about the way the rupee is depreciating. He said that this is quite common to countries that are seeing high growth phases and has happened in countries like China and Japan as well. So that's something that Sanjeev Sanyal stated. He was also stating and about the fact about India's firm stance in the ongoing trade negotiations amidst global tariff uncertainties. So the question, ladies and gentlemen, is as global uncertainties and tensions rise with the recent US tariff hikes that are impacting economies across the world, how much of a boost is this Cepa agreement going to be for India and Oman, and the kind of divergences, the kind of convergences, I beg your pardon, that countries from both sides, businesses from both the sides can essentially look at to discuss that and more in various aspects of this very crucial FTA. I'm now joined in by Navdeep Suri. He's a former diplomat. Joining Mr. Suri is Mr. Ratan Srivastava. He's a fellow at Atlantic Council. Thank you very much, Mr. Suri and Mr. Srivastava, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on India Tonight. First things first to you, Mr. Suri. Help us understand the kind of convergences, the kind of opportunities that this Cepa creates for businesses on both sides of the spectrum. Already, like my colleague was mentioning, we have a trade worth $10 billion that was clocked in 2025. What more can this Cepa do for trade and economic ties on both sides?
Well, I think over the last few years, the government of India is using these FTAs fairly smartly. And the reason it's called a Cepa is that it goes beyond trade in goods. It includes services, it includes investments, it includes mobility of workers, pacts, all of that. I think the reason why these are important for us at this point of time is that we are actively seeking to diversify markets. We are trying to make up for the setback that we have received because of the US attitude, the US tariffs. We've also seen that when we negotiate CEPAs or FTAs smartly, taking into account the complementarities in the economies with which we are signing the CEPA. We've done this with Australia, we've done this with UAE, and now, of course, this one with Oman. We do find that it leads to a boost in our exports. And particularly in the case of Oman, we expect that some of our more labor-intensive sectors like textiles, garments, gems and jewelry should be able to increase their presence in the Omani market. We saw this in the case of UAE, for example, that our trade post-Cepa in barely 3 years has grown almost by 30%, from $70-odd billion with UAE. It's reached $100 billion. So we can see the impact that Cepa is having. While we try to avoid the mistakes perhaps that we made about in the 90s or early 2000s when we signed CEPAs with countries like Thailand and Malaysia and others, the FTAs, which led to really a damage to India's electronics industry and some of our other key sectors. So I think the trick for us is to be smart about which countries we choose for FTA at least until such time that we feel confident that we can compete on an equal footing, and we can make sure that the value addition norms that we put in these agreements, as we did with UAE, are respected by the other country, and it doesn't become a kind of a trade diversion from a third country. You don't get Chinese exports coming through the back door into India.
Question on it's an excellent segue for my next question too. In fact, Ratan Srivastava, fellow at Atlantic Council. Now, Ratan, over to you. From your vantage point at Atlantic Council, how does this particular agreement, according to you, in fact, is unfolding against this entire backdrop of, the uncertainty when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to trade, and also tariff wars? How do you look at this entire deal, considering this is nearly a deal struck by Oman in nearly 20 years and India's second major pact happening this year?
So thank you. It's a wonderful set of questions you've asked me. I'll try to tackle them one by one. So and thank you to Ambassador Suri. He has given us a perfect segue and a perfect context to what I'm going to talk now. And as he spoke about the India-UAE deal, that is the Cepa, which has happened, and it has led to a growth of trade from $70 billion to more than $100 billion in just 3 years. He also touched upon the earlier mistakes that we probably made in doing bilateral agreements in Southeast Asia, where there was a possible round tripping of Chinese and other products which came to India via these countries. And therefore, it did hurt our economic interest at that point in time. But I think we've made amends on those routes. One of the I would say most important takeaways from the deal with Oman is this: that, as you rightly said, this is the first deal that Oman has signed with anybody except the US, that they signed in 2006, and they have now signed with us in 2025. So this is the first deal in almost 20 years that they've signed on a bilateral basis. Oman is very important to us from the strategic location that it enjoys. It sits at the crossroads of the routes between Asia, Europe, and Africa. So a deal with Oman gives us access probably to the lucrative markets in the region apart from Oman itself. Oman's trade with India is just about $10 billion as of now. As we know, most of the, I would say, goods that are coming to India from Oman are petroleum goods, gas, naphtha, and a bit of fertilizers. All these things are very hugely required in India for our energy security as well as for food security. But what it gives us in terms of advantage is this: that, as Ambassador Suri also said, labor-intensive sectors like textiles, but also engineering, electronics, pharma. These are the exports that I would probably see grow very quickly with Oman, and therefore the trade imbalance that we have right now would very quickly probably be resolved. The other thing is this: that this is the second GCC country that with whom India has had a bilateral trade agreement. First was, of course, with the UAE. So we should see this as a series of the agreements that India is trying to do in the Middle East and in the West Asian countries, whether we have our agreements or arrangements with Saudi Arabia, with Bahrain, with Qatar, with UAE. So we are probably trying to diversify and de-risk our trade basket. And so, as Ambassador very clearly said, it's a Cepa. It's a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. It is not only the export of goods, but also services, in which India definitely enjoys, I would say, a better leverage as compared to other countries. What we see here is this: that this is going to be probably a sequence of events before India probably signs up with the GCC, a trade agreement, and that would give us a huge advantage as a trading bloc.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mr. Srivastava. This is something that the Union Commerce Minister has stated on multiple occasions, that this is going to be a gateway for India to access those GCC countries, and we might even be looking at doing individual FTAs and trade arrangements with countries from the GCC. But let me come to you, Ambassador Suri. How does this Cepa position India vis-a-vis China? China's presence in Oman and the wider Gulf, because that is also one question that needs to be addressed.
Look, First, let us look at it at the political level. India's relations with Oman, with Muscat, are the oldest and the closest that we had traditionally with any of the countries in the Gulf. I don't know if you're aware, but until the 1950s, the Sultan of Muscat used to receive a 18-gun salute under the British rule, and was educated at Mayo College along with many of the other Indian princes. So it was really, Oman was seen as an extension of the British Indian area beyond the mainland of India. China was nowhere on the scene at that time. So there is a certain degree of political connection, of history, of people, of the old Sindhi and Gujarati communities that you have in Oman that the Chinese do not. And yet, on the economic side, there's no doubt that the Chinese are very competitive, that they have penetrated markets in which traditionally India occupied the pole position, and that what the Cepa does is it creates a level playing field for us. Our exporters will no longer be disadvantaged by tariffs, while Chinese, for example, or other countries could get duty-free access or enjoy other privileges. There is also the strategic dimension of this agreement, because we've generally felt that while our political and defense ties with Oman were extremely close, our economic relationship was lagging. And I hope that the Cepa will create conditions which are conducive to us, for us to attract a much greater Omani investment into India. And this is something I'm sure that the government will be mindful of. Of course, we keep trying this with the Saudis, with the UAE, with the Qataris and others in the Gulf, because these are very capital-rich countries. And we feel that we have the market that we offer. But really, we do have more work to do to reduce the regulatory burden, to make ourselves more receptive to FDI and also to foreign portfolio investment. I think you mentioned earlier in the segment that the finance minister is working on some of these areas. And I really think we need to do that so that we position ourselves competitively vis-a-vis other countries that are trying to seek investment from the Gulf.
That was nice bit of trivia from you, Ambassador Suri, that we heard about history of relation between India and Oman. But apart from this entire trade figures, there is also like a very strong Indian community of over 7 lakh Indians that resides in Oman. So beyond these trade figures, if you can help us understand, how will some of these Cepa's provisions, provide for professional mobility and also mode 4, services? How will these mode 4 services transform the lives of some of the professionals and the community over there, the Indian diaspora in Oman?
I think the immediate impact will be felt by Indian companies that have invested in Oman. Intra-corporate company transfers of employees become a little bit easier. Instead of having a 90-day visa for companies to send their employees from India on a software upgrade project or on something else in a manufacturing facility, they will now be able to get 2-year visas. So all of that is helpful, and that's why I think when we talk about Cepa rather than FTA, these labor mobility agreements become such an integral and crucial part from our perspective. So it's useful. Let me just give you then another piece of trivia, since you like that. There's a very famous Indian family, they're called the Khimjis, and the Khimjis were traditionally regarded as the lenders to the sheikhs of Oman. They were the big business family for over 100 years. And they were the ones who helped build the first Indian temple in Muscat over 100 years ago.
Right, Mr. Srivastava. and very rightly you mentioned that story of the Kimji family that's also been narrated once or twice by the Indian Commerce Minister as well. So, of course, that is one big highlight as far as India-Oman is concerned. But let me come to you, Ambassador Suri. Ambassador Suri, when we look at India's FTA strategy, we are interested in forging agreements with like-minded countries, with developed countries, and these agreements have to be mutually beneficial. It's something that the Indian government has stated. How do you really see this in terms of India's negotiating strategy and at the same time maintaining its sovereignty as well and negotiating a posture?
Look, we have, I think, if anything, erred towards the side of sovereignty rather than of free trade. And in the process, I think in the 90s and 2000s, we lost out the opportunity to get integrated into global supply chains. You can't kind of have your cake and eat it too. If you want to get integrated into global supply chains, global value chains, then you will have to allow easier imports as well as boost exports. And I think we are waking up to that reality. That while we want to protect our markets, we will also have to create the opportunity for component suppliers to come to our country and enable our finished products to be more competitive. So I think we are taking baby steps right now. Probably as we go forward, we will have to get ourselves into regional free trade agreements of one form or another so that the individual FTAs that we are doing are supplemented at least with one of the big regional economic groupings. And that will then give us a much better opportunity to leverage the size of our market and our manufacturing sector and really position ourselves as a country that is a strong exporter of manufactured goods. I don't think we are there yet.
Absolutely, Ambassador Suri. My question to you, in fact, Ratan Srivastava, is that since we are also discussing a lot of trivia, Oman was in fact one of the first Gulf countries to purchase India-made rifles. So with Cepa easing, investment, do you see potential for joint ventures, especially in the defense manufacturing, such as drones or even for naval platforms?
This is a rather interesting question, but I hope I'm not touching on anything sensitive territory over here because defense being defense. Having said that, I think we have to keep in mind a couple of things over here. That the investments that would be probably being done in the defense and weapons and equipment territory would probably have to keep in mind the IP part of it as well. So they have to be the weapons and equipments and defense manufacturing, which is being done in country with Indian IP. So therefore, what you just said about the drones, for example, or the electronics in the terms in the sense of radar, or in terms of the ground equipment, or in terms of the missiles that we are making in India with Indian technology, which have proved actually extremely I would say cost-worthy and beneficial in terms of the cost of the value that they provide in terms of the, I would say, the delivery systems that we have. That is a huge, I would say, advantage India has in terms of cost. So cost arbitrage apart, we talk about drones, we talk about equipment which is probably in military category, but also military mobility is a huge advantage that India enjoys. But when I say military mobility, I say in terms of both the soft-skinned vehicles and armored vehicles. In military mobility, we have a huge advantage of in domestic manufacturing with Indian primes such as Tatas and Ashok Leylands of the world and Mahindras manufacturing for the country, in the country, and very, very cost effective at a fraction of the cost of the foreign OEMs. In addition, the VAP that we have, the wheeled armored vehicle that we have, is also finding a lot of interest in the Middle East because it's very, very beneficial in terms of technology. Technology is world class, it's cost effective, developed totally in India. So I agree with you that in terms terms of the defense hardware, weapons and equipment, there is an opportunity not only in terms of, in Oman or Muscat, but also in terms of West Asian countries. But having said that, this is again a very sensitive matter, which probably would require more, I would say, deliberation before we get
Absolutely.
into full-fledged exports, I would say, strategy for West Asia. But that is definitely on the table.
Absolutely, Mr. Srivastava, given the fact that also there is significant U.S. presence in the region as well. So we'll have to see how to sort of navigate that particular aspect of defense in the next couple of years. But we have time for just one more question, and I'll take that question to you. Let me also quote what the Economic Advisory Council's members, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, today stated at the India Economic Conclave. He said, and I quote, WTO-based multilateral trading system is largely broken, but looking into 2026, Ambassador Suri, do you see more of these bilateral trading arrangements? And how do you see trade shaping up in 2026?
It is being shaped by a factor called Trump. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the U.S. courts, what verdict they give on the extraordinary abuse of tariffs that the U.S. administration has done over the last year. I think the way they've moved 180 degrees from preaching globalization to using tariffs as a weaponized almost instrument is quite extraordinary. So, I think the place to watch in 2026 is what happens in the U.S. courts with regard to the tariffs, what happens to the U.S. economy as a result of the tariffs, and what happens in the U.S. congressional elections in November 2026 because of the disruption being caused by the tariffs. I think so. I'll be watching very closely how this shapes up in the U.S. because the reality is that, you're talking about a $10 billion with Oman, but you're talking about potentially, $200 billion plus with of trade with the Americans. So it needs to be kept in that perspective. From an Indian angle, I think we will continue to work to diversify. And I don't see us bending to the Trump tantrums. I think we are too mindful of our sovereignty, and we will never demean or debase ourselves the way some of our neighboring countries have done.
Well, absolutely, Ambassador Suri. That was Ambassador Navdeep Suri along with Ratan Srivastava. We were discussing, today's watershed moment as India and Oman sign this Cepa. Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today and giving your thoughts and insights on Cepa.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.